Right, so for people that's been following the channel for a little while, you'll know that this is one of my daily cars at the minute. This car is going to be getting replaced as a daily for another car very soon, which obviously I'll show on the channel when I get it. So this car is going to be like, well, it's not going to be used as much. So it's completely stock at the minute, as you've probably seen on the channel before. I've done some work to the head or whatever, valve stem guide, stuff like that. And you can see completely stock. It's got a VXR turbo and it's got a decap pipe, and that's about it. Set of plugs, nothing else. As it's not going to be used so much and not as a daily, so it don't have to be as reliable, even though they're reliable anyway. Who wants to see me turn this to a stage 3.5 car? So 290 horsepower. It's what, 190 horsepower at the minute, probably a little bit less on a stock map, just good for fuel economy. But turning it up to 290 horsepower would be fun. The boost bus would have a little bit more power, so obviously I just need an intercooler for it. I need to sort the cat back exhaust out, so I've got to get rid of the big silencer on it and a new back box, and then we stick stage 3.5 VXR stuff. So we'd put new injectors in it. At the minute it's obviously stock let injectors, only go up to about 260 horsepower. Sort this air filter out so it's got like better breathing capabilities. Obviously we've got the VXR turbo, just got to update this actuator because it's just a stock DY actuator at the minute. Got to go for a DZ actuator, and then change this from the 70mm MAF to the 80mm MAF. And then we've got stage 3.5 car. So if you want to see that, drop a comment in the comment section. Here we're just swapping over the front and rear tyres. If you watched some of the videos, you'll notice that we had 88R tyres that we got put on it. Brand new snowflakes, all powder coated up, and they've been on there probably about 6 or 8 months now, so just swapping them around from the rears to the fronts, just to give them even wear, because the rears on these cars never wear at all. So you can see that's the front, and I'll just put the rears on the front so you can see how much meat there is left on them. So as with anything that I ever do, I always get really way involved. So you can see this is the airbag that come off the Zafira. It had a split in it for ages, I just didn't get around to doing it. Right, so hands up, how many people actually torque down their wheel bolts? These vauxhalls take 110 newton meters. Now I know you're thinking, how many ugger-duggers does it need to get 110 newton meters? But until you've seen a wheel bolt snap like I have and the wheel actually come off on the motorway, 110 newton meters on the vauxhall wheels. So while we're playing around with this Zafira in this episode, you can see on the front of this car, when I took off the wheels the other day, the fronts, the shocks needed replacing. Checked them, like I do, I just go over the car, check everything over. Shocks needed replacing on the fronts. I'll do the rears eventually as well, but the rears are good at the minute. So what I've gone out, it's got some Sash shock absorbers. Anyone knows Sash, very good company. Good thing is, the Astra G and the Zafira A, the front shocks and the springs and everything are the same. And as you know, on the Regia side, I took these Spax ones off that weren't low enough but are still nice and sporty. Drop it a little bit more, and you can see the massive arch gap on these at the minute. And these do look good when they're dropped a little bit lower. I don't want it to be unpractical. The idea of it is to still be a practical car. So we're going to take the shocks and that off it at the minute. I've also got some discs and that to do on the rear. That's what we're going to get on with, and then we're going to stage 1 map it. So this is just a quick one for people that don't work on the suspension and, you know, dirty parts of an engine or a car normally. So you can see obviously we've got a lot of grime and grit and rust and all sorts of things on the threading. Now if you try, you can see it all coming off when I'm doing my things. If you try to just blast that off now with a gun or spanner, you're just going to start cross threading this bolt. It's all going to start spinning. It's going to be a nightmare. So just take your time for a second, just go over it with a wire, you know, like brass. Just getting, obviously these ones are clean, I've already done, but just knock off the rust, like all the dirt and all sorts of grime that's already on the bolts, and then just get a bit of lube and lube up the bolts. Now let that soak for a little bit, and then you can blast them off, and you're going to get that off no problem then. No cross threading of these nuts, no cross threading of the bolts, and they're going to come off nice. You're going to be able to put them back on nice. A lot of people, you know, they just blast it off with all the rust and the crud, and then the bolts are stripped, then they're no use to be used again. The guns will get them off because they're so powerful nowadays. So yeah, that's what I always do first with suspension stuff like this. So I've just pulled off the standard spring. This is obviously the OPC standard spring, and this is the Astra G Spax spring. So you can see where I've just done a measurement. It's 20mm lower, which is absolutely perfect. It's about the drop that I wanted. 20mm all round will be perfect for the car. Don't want it too low, don't want it no lower than that. And obviously these springs will be a lot stiffer as well. So you can see you'll have the standard coils which are here. That's the progression, and then you get into these stiffer coils that are in the middle, and it just makes it handle a lot better, especially as it's a heavier car than the Astra, so you know it needs that extra support. So you can see, going to get these on now. Don't need to use spring compressors for these, but I did with these ones because you know they're like a ticking time bomb. Any mechanic, if they ain't got the stands to put these in and they're just using these normal spring compressors, which you use here, I just use them with the gun and blast them up. But it's like using a ticking time bomb. If they slip out, and that top mount's going to hit you straight in the face. So I've just cleaned up the top mounts and the rubbers that go to the springs, you know, just stop them squeaking and that. These are all good. Checked them over. You can see there's hardly any wear on the top mounts. These lines normally wear out when they're in trouble. But this bearing on the top here is shot, so that's obviously the original one, or you know, been replaced at some point. But try and listen to that. You can hear that's a shot bearing. So what's happened in there is the grit's got in there, the grease has got in there, and you see it's dried out inside there, so that's no good to go back on. I wouldn't put that back on, it's going to be noisy. So what I normally do is I keep these in spare. So these are just bearings, and then I grease these up, or if they've come out of top mounts, I just use the ones that you can hear. This one, it's got no noise to it at all. You can hear there's no noise to that at all. So the bearing and everything, I'll just stick some constant velocity grease in there, lube it back up. These are made by Inner, these ones, so they're proper GM ones. They are only cheap as well, so you can see here Inner ones. And most people think you have to change the whole top mount when they're the bearings are knackered, but you don't. This is the part number 90147276 if you need these. And what you do is you just put these in the back of a, I don't know, a vice or whatever you want to clamp it down on, and literally just tap it through with a punch, and they will just pop out. So you can see these bearings there, they'll just pop out. I'll show you one, and then you can literally just press or lube it up and tap this new one in, and you've got a nice fresh bearing, because you can't be using that. Hear the state of that, that's knackered. So I've just pulled that bearing out that top mount. You can see it literally just sits in there nice and tightly, easy enough. You can hear how knackered that is. So there's a lot of play to side in there. So there we go, fresh new bearing in there now, no noise. Now obviously make sure that that's seated in there properly. So one side's complete and the other side I've just pulled off. You see how nasty this is. We need to start cleaning in these arches, I think, with a jet wash. But yeah, you can see, you know, the springs had it, powder coat's coming off of that. The shocks had it, I know you can't see, but it wasn't rebounding properly. They're probably original shocks, I'm not even sure. Get the dirt off of them. Probably clean underneath it, you can see, like, you know, black powder coat through it, so they probably ain't rotten. I don't really know what shocks they are on there, if they've been replaced or if they're the genuine ones that come on there. But either way, we've got some nice Sat shocks on there now, which is a brilliant make, and we know they're going to work properly. So these are the uprated ones as well. They are actually for the OPC model. They do different types, and these are the OPC ones. So you can see with the lowering springs, that's going to get on. You can see how much that top mount drops down, about 20 mil, absolutely perfect. It's exactly what we're looking for. So we're going to get the other one built up now, get these ones on. So both shocks are all built up now. Now remember what I said about these top mounts. When you are replacing them nuts, never use the thick nut that comes on the top that I always find. Even with the Zafiras, they have a problem with the top mount coming up, so you can see how much thicker this top nut is. And also they supply these nuts in the kit. I never ever use them. I use the original lock nut. It's a lot thinner and it makes the cap still be able to go on the top. When you start using these nuts, plastic cap that goes on the top, you can't fit it again, so don't use them. Right, as you can see, the shocks and springs are on. Actually showing up the rest of the suspension in a minute. So I've just went over all the suspension bushes, checked everything, checked the pads and discs, which I always do when this is off. You see loads of meat on the discs and no grooves or anything in it, but the rears are knackered, so we've got some nice paddage ones to go on the rears as well. So get these wheels back on and see how much this has lowered the car. So it's definitely going to help the handling as well. Much better spring setup. Just looking over the rear suspension setup now. Just there was a squeak coming from the rear. It's obviously these bump stops, they always squeak when they start to get a little bit old over time. You can hear there the squeak that I'm talking about, really annoying. But while I was here, noticed that the discs, you can see they've really had their day here. Absolutely knackered. So I'm going to pull them off. Pads are alright, but we're going to change them as well. Might as well. We've got some nice new padded ones. Then we're going to do something about these springs. We're going to check them against the Astra G springs and see if they're exactly the same. I think they are, but we'll check. And then we're going to change these shocks. Not right now, they're absolutely fine at the minute. But we're going to uprate them ones as well, like we did on the front. So we're going to get on with this now. Get some nice new padded set up on there. Now we're going to go for a little bit more power. We need to be able to stop as well. Something that people really do not think about. So the simple thing that most people forget with these hubs is the most important part. When you're taking the brake discs off and you're removing them, make sure you get any of the surface rust, any of the grit and anything that was on the hub once you remove the disc, because the rust obviously comes off the disc, gets stuck to the hub. And then if you don't make sure that that hub is perfectly flat, and just go over it with a drill and a brass wheel, and just make sure all that surface rust is off, because otherwise these obviously the discs were going to be spinning at really high RPM, especially when you're on the road. If you don't, they're going to have a slight wobble to them, and it's just going to hinder braking, especially you're going to get like a vibration through the pedal. Just make sure the hubs are completely clean. I haven't even cleaned these off yet. Just done a little section there. You can just see the difference between that, removing the pitted rust and the nasty bits that are stuck in there. I know it don't look a lot, but them little millimeters, they accentuate throughout the disc. So most mechanics will do this throughout the proper garages, but you know, these videos are aimed at home mechanics, so that's what I will always do, clean up that and then get some brake cleaner and then wipe it over a rag, and then you're ready to go and put the disc back on. So obviously we're just going for the Padged discs and pads, you know, OE quality, ATE, Brembo, Padged. They're all OE quality stuff. No point skimping on brake discs, as you know. Don't bother with any of the cheap crap. There's like, you get a discount on any of these parts. They're very, very similar to the money to like the cheaper brands anyway. And don't want to be messing around with the brakes. Probably the most important part of the car, as you know. So things that people don't understand when they price up brake pads, brake discs or whatever is like fitting kits as well. So on the cheaper pads, you'll get obviously a cheap crappy pad, and it'll just be a box of 4 pads. You know, the Padged kit comes with brand new bolts, brand new shims. I mean, these shims ain't cheap on their own. If you ever know what they are, they obviously where the brake pad slides in and out of. You can see you just copper grease them bits up. Over time, they obviously wear, move around. You get brand new shims with them as well. So, you know, spend that little bit extra, get the premium brand stuff. Right, that's the car down on the ground now, and the springs and shocks are on, the brakes are all on. So you can see it's a little bit of a drop on the front, but not too much. Obviously, this is a daily. Don't want to be able to not ever go over speed umps and everything. So you can see, got the stiffer springs on there now, better shocks. So that's going to handle a lot better on the front. Going to get camber bolts in there and do that as well. You can see the rears are still at a stock height, which is too high at the minute. So they're going to be dropped down. Going to get some new shocks and put them on the back. And you can see through there, brake discs, brake pads all on. Took it out for a little drive. Everything's perfect. So we've got the stopping, got the suspension now. Make sure everything's good. They're the most important parts. So we've got this engine now to sort out. This is a VXR turbo on here at the minute. Going to change this actuator out because it's a standard let actuator. That's no good for the boost we're going to be running in. I want the proper boost control. Also, we're going to rig up a boost gauge. There's no boost gauges or anything in the car. Don't want any of the gauges in the car. Got an AFR gauge as well. I'm going to rig up into the exhaust. Deleted the secondary lambda sensor, so that's where the AFR gauge is going to go temporarily while I map the car. So we're going to get rid of this secondary boost control solenoid, which is at the back at the minute. I'm going to pull this off and I'll show you exactly where it is. Removing that so that we bypass that, so we get full boost in first and second gear rather than just third onwards. And we're just going to run it off this front boost control solenoid, which is here. So here's the stock let actuator. You can see it's a little bit different from the VXR actuator, the DZ. So these are a DY, these are a DZ. A little bit different. So when you're looking at a turbo, you can tell when it's got a let or a VXR LEH actuator on there. You can see these just got a little bit of a different spring. They've got like a stainless arm on as well, just a bit better design. So just going to change that over now so we've got better boost control. So obviously when we're talking high back pressures, high boost, you know, like this big KO6 turbo here, you're going to need to run a different style actuator, you know, one that you can actually change the springs on. So for example, there's 17 psi of springs in here at the minute, which is quite massive for a little turbo like that, and that's just to hold this penny wastegate shut. This has got a ported manifold on it, cut back exhaust blades, etc. It's just to hold this penny valve shut at really high back pressures, especially on these side of turbos. If you don't have a really strong wastegate on it, this flap is going to open up slightly at high boost, and you're not going to be able to hold the boost to high RPM. So this held 24 psi to redline, which is unheard of. Obviously the setup that I'm using really helps with the ported manifold, etc. But you know, these are much better than these VXR actuators. Right, so I've just rigged up a AFR gauge, you can see here, and obviously a boost gauge as well, so we know what boost we're running. So I've just went out onto the stock map, seen that the boost it's running 7 psi and the AFRs are 11.9 to 12, which is a little bit lean. Absolutely perfect for a stock map because it's running such low boost, it really doesn't matter. So we're going to turn the boost up a little bit. Aim is going to be around for about 13, 14 psi on hold. So we're going to turn the boost up. We're going to quickly flash on another map that was just been written. Turn off the traction control, turn off the rear lambda sensor as well. So I've just put the AFR sensor into the rear lambda sensor in the exhaust. You can see all the wiring and that's just rigged up temporarily because obviously I don't want gauges in the car. So let's just quickly start it up. So now it all works with the new map on it. So once it's warmed up, should idle, you know, around, it's on cold start in a minute, but it will idle around 14.8 to 15 sort of thing once it's warmed up. So it would have helped if I plugged in the boost gauge. So we've got pound foot inch on these boost gauges because this is an old MAD one. If you know Mark Sheed, MAD, this is actually a really rare item. I got it out of one of my old RS turbos, but you know that 25 psi is not enough for the cars, like the high power cars that we build, the Cosworths and that these days. If you ain't over 30 psi, don't even talk to me. So as you can see here, this is the modification to the stock ECU map. So you can see that was the original file that I took off the car. I always label them so I know, and that way I've got the stock map to go back on if I ever need to go back. You can see it's a lot more complicated than a standalone ECU to modify. It's hex dump files. If I change it to 3D mode, you can see how much more difficult it is. So as opposed to like a Link or an M-Tron ECU, they're a lot more easier to use. Standalone ECUs, the way to go. Obviously, these ECUs are advanced. They're very good, but you have to know how to use them. And if you can't modify the file, don't touch it. But the standalone ECU is far superior to any stock ECU. I don't care what people say. So as you can see, it's dark out here now. I'm just flashing on a new map that I've adjusted for more boost levels. And we got up to 11 psi on the boost gauge, which is nice, pulled nice, just weren't enough. So the fueling was perfect, so we're going to turn up the boost a little bit more now to about 14 psi, which is a perfect stage 1 map. It's going to pull really nice, hardly any modifications needed to these cars. These Z20 LET engines are absolutely brilliant. You know, it's the only reason I mess around with them, because they are really good engines. So I've got to do some work on this GSI today, my mate's one. Basically, the water pump started leaking, even though it was a brand new water pump. I think it was a Gates kit, and it started leaking straight away. You know, you have 40 parts, even brand new parts can be 40. So we're going to remove that now. We're going to have to obviously do the cam belt, and we're going to change the cam belt at the same time. And it keeps having this stupid issue with these terrible tensioners. I never ever use these things. The bolt keeps coming undone, even if I've got Loctite in there, whatever, I have to keep making spacers for it. I never use these things at all. You've probably had a lot of problems with them yourself, so I'm going to have to sort out that issue there. It's got a brand new belt on it as well. You can see we replaced it last time. Going to get the car up in the air now. You can see there's been air getting in the system because it keeps boiling over, and obviously it's getting hot now, so we're going to have to sort that out before the hot weather comes for the summer. So another thing we're going to fit to the car is a brand new Cupra R splitter. So this one's just brand new from Volkswagen Audi group. So Seat Cupra, going to fit that onto the bumper as well, because these GSI bumpers, they look really good when they've got them splitters on. They just look a little bit lower. So you can see the car needs a wash, absolutely filthy at the minute, but we're going to get it up in the air now, get that splitter fitted. So as I said in the past video, even though them cam belt and water pump wasn't in warranty still, Kurt Nevlock still sorted us out with a brand new GM one, even though it wasn't his fault. But it's been leaking from the usual place that they leak from when they've done 100,000 miles, but this one's only done a couple of thousand. It started leaking pretty much straight away. So we've got a GM one there, GM Gates belt as well to fit. Don't need any of the tensioners or anything because they were changed very, very recently, so we're just going to swap that over. Obviously I didn't want to change the water pump because that's the only fault we've got, and not change the cam belt because, you know, you can pick up little bits of damage. I don't like using second-hand cam belts for the cheapness of them. So as you can see up in here, this is a brand new water pump, and it's been leaking from day one. You can see where it's leaking from up behind the pump itself. It's not actually leaking from the seal, which I've checked, and it's been running down here. Literally started pretty much as soon as the belt was fitted. So you can see that the tension, everything, all the pulleys and everything's brand new, so they're not needed. So just put the locking tool in the cam so that we can time it up. Just pull off the belt, it's all timed up. Just put the pump in and put the cam belt back on, so we don't have to time the cam timing and the crank timing all back up again. So I just removed the old water pump, and it appears to be leaking from around this core plug, which is really weird. When I've just dug it out, it even looks like it's leaking from this sort of gap between the core plug. Really weird thing about that is I'm going to pull this core plug out, because on the brand new GM water pump, you can see this is obviously a GM water pump, there's a core plug and it's got the same gap in between it. Now why would it need a core plug to block it off if it wasn't sealing properly? So I'm going to have a look at that. I'm going to pull this one out, because obviously this is the old one, and see what's going on behind it, to if it's that's what's causing the leak, because otherwise we're just going to have exactly the same issue with the GM water pump. So I've just checked with the different pumps. I've got this pump that's brand new. I've also got another pump. I've pulled the core plug out, and you can see that is where it was leaking from. There's like a hole through here. I don't know why it's leaking through there, because they're all the same and they've all got the gap around the side here, so if they've all got the hole, they should all be leaking. But this just must have been a faulty part, because I've just checked with another 2 pumps and they're exactly the same. So you can see I'm just checking over all the different pumps. This one's a pattern pump or a Gates pump, whatever, and it's got exactly the same gap there. So, oh no, it's actually a GM pump. It just didn't have it on the normal places. It's actually a GM pump, just seen it there. And you can see it's exactly the same, but this one was on a running car that I removed it from and it worked fine. So there obviously was just a fault that was allowing this one to leak. Right, so we've got a fresh water pump in there now, just about to see her down there. That's all sorted out, so you can see we put a new cam belt on there. These locking tools are invaluable for these cars as well, keeping these cam pulley's in position while you're trying to time up the belt. It's almost impossible otherwise. You can see we replaced the cam belt as well for a brand new one. Now, we didn't really necessarily need to, because it's absolutely mint, no damage to it or anything like that, and it was replaced at the time of the last water pump change. Look how fresh these Cupra splitters are when they've just come out of the packet until they've been scuffed up a little time. So what you do with these is these tag bits get cut down maybe in half on the GSIs. On the SOI turbos you can have them a little bit longer, just gives them more of an aggressive look. What I normally do is I sand these down and paint them, but this one's just going to go on because it's nice and fresh. And you just literally just drill holes all the way around here, and then when it gets to this part you pretty much cut off about 1 inch on the end. So we're going to get this onto this GSI bumper now. They look so more aggressive with the GSI with these Cupra splitters on. So just cut these down, these tabs here, down to 15 millimeters on the GSI. They can be at 20 millimeters on the SOI turbo because they've got a bit more of a bigger gap there. And then just smooth them off, and then that way you can use some longer screws with some washers at the bottom, and that clamps it to the bottom of the bumper. Right, as you can see, it's obviously got dark now, but the front splitter's fitted, and you can see how much more aggressive they make the car look. So I've done the usual mod where I pull the splitter right forward. It's difficult to do, and it's difficult. You don't think that you could be able to do it. You can see also pull the number plate off, and there was a load of sticky crap behind the number plate, so that's all looking fresh as well now.